The silence was deafening. In the middle of Jefferson High's cafeteria, surrounded by a circle of students with phones raised, Emma Rodriguez lay motionless beside her overturned wheelchair. The twisted metal frame told the story of cruelty that had just unfolded. Not a single person moved to help. Then the doors exploded open with a thunderous crash. Heavy combat boots struck the floor like war drums as a figure in desert camouflage strode through the frozen crowd. His steel-grey eyes swept the room before landing on the unbearable sight. The bullies who had been laughing seconds before now stood paralyzed. "You think my sister is weak?" His voice boomed across the silent cafeteria, carrying the authority of someone who had faced real battles. That was the moment everything changed at Jefferson High. Emma Rodriguez had learned to navigate the corridors of Jefferson High with her head down, her wheelchair moving quietly through the chaos of teenage life. At 17, she had mastered the art of invisibility, a survival skill necessary in a place where being different meant being a target. Her dark hair often fell like a curtain across her face as she hurried from class to class, trying to avoid the stares and whispers that followed her everywhere. The hallways of Jefferson High were a symphony of cruelty disguised as normalcy. Designer sneakers squeaked against polished floors, lockers slammed with metallic finality, and conversations buzzed with the typical concerns of high school life. But for Emma, these sounds formed a different melody, one punctuated by snickers, pointing fingers, and the occasional cruel comment thrown her way like stones. Her sanctuary was the library, a quiet corner where she could lose herself in books and dream of worlds where people were judged by their character rather than their physical limitations. Emma harbored dreams of becoming a journalist, using her words to give voice to those who had been silenced. She filled notebooks with stories and observations, finding strength in the written word when her voice felt too small to matter. The cafeteria was her daily battlefield. Long tables stretched across the room, each one claiming its own social territory. The athletes dominated the center tables, their boisterous laughter echoing off the walls. The wealthy students claimed the prime spots near the windows, while various other groups carved out their own spaces in the social ecosystem. Emma always chose a small table in the far corner where she could eat in relative peace while reading. Her older brother David had been her protector since childhood, the one person who truly understood her struggles. When he enlisted in the army 3 years ago, Emma felt like she was losing her shield against the world. His letters from overseas were her lifeline, filled with encouragement and reminders of her inner strength. "Little sister," he would write, "you have a warrior's heart. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." David Rodriguez was more than just a brother. He was Emma's hero. Before deployment, he would push her wheelchair through the neighborhood park, telling her stories of courage and resilience. His presence alone was enough to quiet the cruel voices that sometimes followed them. When he left for basic training, Emma felt more vulnerable than ever, but his weekly letters kept her grounded. The bullying at Jefferson High wasn't always overt. Sometimes it was the way conversations stopped when she approached, or how groups would part dramatically as she passed, making exaggerated gestures about giving her space. Other times, it was more direct. Textbooks knocked from her lap, cruel nicknames muttered just loud enough for her to hear, or the occasional accidental bump that would send her wheelchair spinning. 3 students in particular had made Emma's life miserable. Tyler Brooks, the quarterback with a mean streak wider than his throwing arm, his sidekick Jake Morrison, who laughed at everything Tyler did, and Brett Williams, who recorded their cruelty on his phone like it was entertainment. Tyler's father was a prominent businessman in town, and his mother sat on the school board, giving him a sense of untouchability that he wielded like a weapon. Emma had tried reporting the incidents to teachers and administrators, but her complaints were often dismissed as teenage drama or misunderstandings. "Boys will be boys," they would say, or "maybe you're being too sensitive." The message was clear. She was on her own in this fight. On this particular autumn day, the cafeteria hummed with its usual energy. Emma sat at her corner table, a sandwich untouched as she read from her worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was studying courage in literature while struggling to find it in her own life. The afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, creating a peaceful bubble around her small space. Tyler Brooks had been watching Emma from across the room, his cruel smile growing wider as an idea formed in his mind. He nudged Jake and Brett, pointing in Emma's direction. "Watch this," he said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. The three boys approached Emma's table with the swagger of predators closing in on prey. Students at nearby tables began to take notice, some pulling out phones in anticipation of whatever was about to unfold. Emma felt their presence before she saw them, that familiar chill that ran down her spine whenever trouble was approaching. "Hey, Emma," Tyler said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "How's the racing business today? You must be getting tired from all that high-speed maneuvering around school." Jake snickered at Tyler's words, while Brett held up his phone, already recording. Emma kept her eyes on her book, hoping they would lose interest and move on, but her silence only seemed to encourage them. "Come on, don't be antisocial," Tyler continued, reaching down to tap the armrest of her wheelchair. "We're just trying to be friendly here. Maybe you could teach us some of your moves." Emma finally looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just leave me alone. I'm not bothering anyone." Tyler's smile twisted into something uglier. "Oh, but you are bothering people, taking up space, slowing down the hallways. It's inconsiderate, really." He grabbed the back of her wheelchair and gave it a sudden jerk, causing Emma to grip the sides in alarm. "Stop it!" Emma said, her voice stronger now but still shaking. The cafeteria had grown quieter, more students turning to watch the unfolding drama. Jake moved to Emma's other side, pretending to examine her wheelchair like it was a piece of machinery. "This thing looks pretty flimsy. I bet it wouldn't take much to tip it over." His words were meant as a threat, but Tyler took them as a suggestion. "You know what, Jake? You might be right." Tyler's hands found the back of Emma's wheelchair again, this time with more aggressive intent. "Let's see how stable this ride really is." Emma's heart raced as she felt her wheelchair being rocked back and forth. Students around them had stopped eating, some standing up to get a better view, others holding their phones higher to capture every moment. But not one person stepped forward to help. "Please," Emma begged, her voice cracking with fear and humiliation. "Don't do this." Tyler's response was to give the wheelchair a violent shove. Emma felt herself falling backward, the world spinning as her chair toppled over completely. She hit the cold linoleum floor hard, her books and lunch tray scattering across the cafeteria. The metallic crash of her overturning wheelchair echoed through the suddenly silent room. Laughter erupted from Tyler and his friends, quickly spreading to other students who found the spectacle entertaining. Phones captured every moment of Emma's humiliation as she lay on the floor, unable to right herself or her broken wheelchair. The twisted metal frame bore witness to the cruelty that had just taken place. "Oops," Tyler said with mock concern, his voice carrying across the room. "Looks like your ride is out of commission. Maybe you should have bought the extended warranty." Emma lay motionless, staring up at the harsh fluorescent lights, fighting back tears of rage and humiliation. The laughter around her felt like physical blows, each cruel comment another wound to her already battered spirit. She thought of David, thousands of miles away, and wished desperately that he were here to protect her like he used to. The cafeteria staff finally noticed the commotion, one worker rushing toward the scene while shouting for someone to get the principal. But the damage was already done. Emma's dignity lay in pieces around her, scattered like the contents of her lunch tray. Just when the situation seemed at its worst, when Emma felt most alone and vulnerable, the cafeteria doors burst open with a sound like thunder. Heavy combat boots struck the floor in measured, deliberate steps that cut through the chaos like a knife. The laughter died instantly as a figure in military fatigues strode through the crowd. David Rodriguez had returned from deployment unannounced, planning to surprise his sister at school. His desert camouflage uniform bore the dust of recent travel, and his face carried the hardened expression of someone who had seen real conflict. When his eyes found Emma on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her wheelchair, something dangerous flashed across his features. The crowd parted before him like water, students instinctively stepping back from the raw authority he projected. Tyler, Jake, and Brett, who had been basking in their moment of triumph, suddenly found themselves face to face with someone who wouldn't be impressed by their social status or intimidated by their teenage bravado. David knelt beside his sister, his voice gentle as he brushed her hair back from her face. "I'm here, Emma. You're safe now." Then he stood to his full height, his gaze finding Tyler with laser precision. The quarterback, who had felt so powerful moments before, now looked like a child, caught in a terrible act. "You think my sister is weak?" David's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded troops in combat zones. The question hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to answer. Tyler tried to maintain his composure, but his voice cracked slightly as he responded. "This is a school, not a military base. You can't just storm in here and—" "I'm her brother," David interrupted, his words cutting through Tyler's bluster. "And I'm a soldier who has seen real courage under fire. What I witnessed here wasn't strength. It was cowardice." The silent crowd pressed closer, phones still recording, but now capturing something entirely different than they had expected. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a reckoning. David stepped closer to Tyler, his presence overwhelming without being physically threatening. Real strength doesn't come from attacking those who can't defend themselves. It comes from protecting those who need protection. My sister has more courage in her heart than you'll ever have in your entire body." Jake and Brett had already begun backing away, their phones lowered and their earlier bravado completely evaporated. They recognized that this was no longer a game, that real consequences were about to follow their actions. Tyler tried one last attempt at defiance. "You don't understand what it's like here. This was just what?" David's voice cut him off again. "Just cruelty. Just bullying someone who couldn't fight back. Just entertainment for a crowd of cowards." He gestured to the gathered students, many of whom now looked ashamed of their earlier laughter. The principal arrived then, pushing through the crowd to assess the situation. He took in the scene, Emma on the floor beside her destroyed wheelchair, the three boys standing guilty and exposed, and the soldier who had clearly disrupted whatever had been happening. "Mr. Brooks, Mr. Morrison, Mr. Williams," the principal said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "My office, now." As the three bullies shuffled away, their heads hanging in shame, David helped Emma into a chair that someone had brought over. The crowd began to disperse, but the atmosphere in the cafeteria had been permanently changed. Within hours, videos of the incident had spread across social media. The clips showed Tyler's cruel attack on Emma, followed by David's powerful intervention. Comments poured in from around the country, some expressing outrage at the bullying, others praising the soldier brother who had stood up for his sister. Local news stations picked up the story, running segments about bullying in schools and the power of family protection. David gave a brief interview, emphasizing that his sister was the real hero of the story, not him. "Emma faces challenges every day with more courage than most people show in a lifetime," he told the reporter. She doesn't need anyone's pity. She needs respect. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Tyler, Jake, and Brett faced suspension and potential criminal charges for assault. Their college prospects dimmed as the video went viral and admissions committees took notice. Tyler's father's business faced boycotts, while his mother was pressured to resign from the school board. But the real change happened within Jefferson High itself. Students who had remained silent began speaking up against bullying. Teachers received additional training on recognizing and preventing harassment. The school implemented new policies and support systems for students with disabilities. Emma found herself at the center of attention she had never wanted, but she used her newfound voice wisely. She spoke at school assemblies about the importance of standing up for others and the real meaning of strength. Her dream of becoming a journalist felt more achievable as her words reached larger audiences. A fund was established in Emma's name to provide support for students with disabilities, but she insisted that the money be used for all students who faced discrimination or bullying. "This isn't about me," she told the donors. "It's about making sure no one else has to face this alone." David returned to his base, but not before seeing his sister transform from a victim into an advocate. The shy girl who had hidden behind books had found her voice and was using it to protect others. He knew that Emma no longer needed his protection. She had discovered her own strength. Jefferson High became a different place in the months that followed. The hallways that had once echoed with cruelty now carried a different energy. Students who had once turned away from bullying began intervening. Teachers who had dismissed complaints began taking them seriously. Emma still used a wheelchair, but she no longer tried to hide in corners. She rolled through the hallways with her head high, greeting classmates who now saw her as a person rather than a target. The wheelchair that had once made her feel vulnerable became a symbol of her resilience. Her notebook filled with new stories, not just dreams of fictional heroes, but real accounts of students finding their courage and standing up for others. She had learned that true strength didn't require the ability to walk. It required the willingness to speak truth in the face of injustice. The viral video of David confronting Tyler continued to circulate months later, but Emma preferred the quieter victories. The student who intervened when someone was being teased, the teacher who took a complaint seriously, the administrator who implemented real change rather than offering empty platitudes. David wrote from overseas, his letters now filled with pride rather than worry. "You've become the leader I always knew you could be," he told her. "You're not just my little sister anymore, you're a force for change." Emma kept his letters in the same wooden box, but now they were joined by thank you notes from other students, invitations to speak at other schools, and articles about the anti-bullying initiatives she had helped inspire. The girl who had once felt invisible had become impossible to ignore. Years later, when Emma graduated from Jefferson High and went on to study journalism in college, she would often think back to that day in the cafeteria, not because of the pain and humiliation she had endured, but because of what came after, the moment she chose to transform her suffering into strength, her silence into voice, her vulnerability into power. The story of Emma Rodriguez and her soldier brother became more than just a viral video. It became a reminder that true strength comes not from physical power or social status, but from the courage to stand up for what's right, the wisdom to lift others up rather than tear them down, and the determination to create change rather than accept injustice. In the end, the girl in the wheelchair had taught an entire school community about the real meaning of strength, not through her legs, but through her unbreakable spirit and unwavering heart.